listener production.
Hey, Chris Spear with you. Happy Monday and welcome to The Briefing. There's a spate of serious diseases that were once common, some deadly, that have become rare thanks to vaccinations. But with vax hesitancy growing in Australia and abroad, that could all change.
It is easier to let your guard down because you think these diseases aren't a threat, but the only reason they're not a threat is because we've had a strong health system that's been holding them back.
That chat with an infectious disease epidemiologist is coming up in the second half of this episode. First, though, let's get into the headlines with Cassidy. It's Monday, the 29th of September.
Hey Chris, and to you listening, we're starting in the UK where Anthony Albanese has received an almost hero-like welcome as he's promised to defend democracy alongside his mate, British PM Keir Starmer.
We all know this is a time when trust in governments and institutions is under challenge. But what I see here in UK Labor, under this man, this leader, this Prime Minister, my friend, is the same determination that I know lives in every member of the Australian Labor Party. An absolute resolve to stand together and defend democracy itself.
In a major speech at the UK Labor Party conference in Liverpool, Albo also said while AI was transforming global economies and the era of peaceful disagreement is being tested, governments can still provide solutions to big challenges like growing the economy, providing adequate housing and healthcare, while also boosting jobs and securing fair wages.
Yeah, now, Tara, he's the first Aussie PM to address this conference in particular, with political experts in the UK saying this morning that the timing couldn't have been better, with rumours that Keir Starmer's leadership is about to be challenged, and that's amid a slump in the polls. So at the moment, the Labor Party is lagging about 10 points behind that right-wing populist party Reform UK. So, you know, that for our listeners is kind of the context behind why we're hearing that strong, almost rally-like messaging from Albo there. But this was Albo's last stop on a pretty huge overseas trip, having been in New York last week to address the UN and stopping over in the UK over the weekend where he actually met with King Charles.
It was splendid. I've got to develop a relationship with him over recent years.
That was Albo speaking with the ABC yesterday after his formal sit-down and lunch with the King, where Albo, a self-described lifelong Republican, also ruled out holding a referendum on Australia becoming a republic.
I wanted to hold one referendum while I was Prime Minister, and we did that.
And that's it.
We did that.
He also defended criticisms put forward by Susan Lee ahead of the Liverpool conference, where the opposition leader accused him of, quote, swanning around with left-wing mates on the taxpayer dollar.
The UK relationship is really important. Every minister in the UK government will be in Liverpool tomorrow. I'll be there too, and I'll be meeting and engaging with them.
Yeah, which are two sides of the coin, Tara, that, you know, we can agree with. Our relationship with the UK is incredibly important. Albanese should be absolutely meeting with every minister that he possibly can to, you know, further that Australian-UK relationship. However, I think there should be an element of honesty and transparency there, because if Albo was attending that conference to rally around Keir Starmer and throw support behind Keir Starmer, who's failing in the polls at the moment, that's also something we should be hearing honestly and transparently from our Prime Minister.
Back home now, where the federal budget is looking to be in better shape than what was first expected. In fact, $18 billion better off. Now, when the federal budget dropped in March this year, government forecasts predicted a deficit, so the gov spending more money than what it's bringing in, of $28 billion for the 2024 to 25 year. But now that's been lowered to 10.
Yeah, and Treasurer Jim Chalmers claims it's a win for responsible economic management, saying the government's reined in spending while also crediting a robust job market and a rise in take-home pay for workers, which in layman's terms, Tara, means more of us are working, we're supposedly making more and thus paying more tax. So hooray for us taxpayers today.
Now, economists do tell us that ongoing and prolonged deficits can affect economic confidence and interest rates, which I mentioned because these new budget papers come at the same time as the RBA begins its 2 days of deliberations on deciding whether to cut interest rates again, and economists are predicting it's likely to keep the cash rate this time on hold at 3.6% after monthly inflation rose slightly last month.
A former Victorian and Queensland political candidate who allegedly gave a Nazi salute at the AFL semi-final during the Welcome to Country and National Anthem will front court today. 39-year-old Tyler Baker-Pearce was arrested by police and received a lifetime ban from the AFL after allegedly making the gesture during the Brisbane Lions and Gold Coast Suns game at the Gabba a fortnight ago. In 2022, a Labor federal member raised concerns about Baker-Pearce running as a candidate in Parliament, saying he had a long history of vile anti-Semitic remarks, having photographed himself smiling outside Auschwitz and outside the mosque where the Christchurch massacre took place.
Yeah, and according to the ABC, he's also filmed himself saying, quote, white power on a number of occasions, questioned whether 6 million people really died in the Holocaust, shared a manual from a neo-Nazi group and an audiobook of Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler, and just this year posted saying #free Thomas Sewell. Now, Sewell is the leader of Australian neo-Nazi group, the Nationalist Socialist Network, who was the one that was charged in recent weeks over an alleged attack on a First Nations camp the same day he led an anti-immigration rally in Melbourne. Now, despite all of this, Baker-Pearce has denied being a Nazi or extremist. Rather, he labels himself as an Aussie patriot. Now, his matter is due to be mentioned in the Brisbane Magistrates Court this morning.
Global drug company Pfizer is being sued over a contraceptive that over 1,300 women have alleged caused them to develop brain tumours. The lawsuit in the US alleges Pfizer failed to warn both women and doctors that its contraceptive injection, Depo-Provera, which is sold in Australia, gives patients an increased risk of developing a tumour that forms in tissues around the brain called intracranial meningioma. It's estimated 74 million use the drug globally, according to a 2019 UN study.
That's right, and there was also a British medical journal study that says basically the risk comes if using the injection for more than a year, which, for context, many women have to take contraceptive drugs for decades, if not their lifetimes. Now, this particular Pfizer drug is associated with a 5.6 times greater risk, according to this study. And this particular brain tumour, luckily, is most commonly benign. However, it can cause vision and hearing loss and seizures.
Yeah, so a hearing is set to take place in Florida today, with lawyers saying the number of women who filed lawsuits since May has tripled, and they expect it could exceed over 10,000. With just over 1,300 women currently involved, the potential claim amount is already in the billions. Lawyers are expected to make their arguments at a hearing today, with Pfizer reportedly set to assert that it did attempt to include a warning about tumour risks on the label. However, it was rejected by the regulator.
And it's a good day to be a Queenslander and a Brisbaneite, Chris, after Brizzy took home 4 wins in a weekend of footy fanfare across both the AFL and NRL.
Brisbane get the job done. They are never satisfied with one flag. The Lions go back-to-back in 2025.
That's right, back-to-back premiers. The Brisbane Lions got a double dose of celebrations beginning in Fitzroy in Melbourne on Saturday after smashing Geelong by 47 points, then heading back to Brisbane to parade the cup to fans, with coach Chris Fagan telling Seven he was humbled with the turnout.
It's just fantastic. You just feel so appreciated when this many people turn up.
And that victory was also made a little bit sweeter after their AFLW side also snagged a win yesterday, Arvo.
Oh, Tara, you've just successfully burnt bridges with every non-Brisbane team member in this team. Anyway, meanwhile, on the same day in the NRL prelim finals, the Panthers managed to hold Brisbane scoreless in the first half before the side came from 14 points down to win by just 2 points. Captain Adam Reynolds bringing home the win with a final 3-minute conversion, ending the Panthers' hopes of a 5-peat or a 5 straight premiership.
We believe it's our time. We've come back from big margins. We've been in front. We've won games. We've put teams away. So we've won in every fashion. But the belief in this team's amazing.
The Broncos are now set to face Melbourne Storm in Sunday's grand final, while the Broncos NRLW side are heading for the finals as well, taking on the Sydney Roosters after beating the Newcastle Knights yesterday in their prelims. I mean, yeah, congrats, Tara. Y'all deserve it. Well done. It was a great game to watch.
I mean, Brizzy, what a time to be alive. I'm very proud of my hometown and state right now. Now, that brings our headlines to a close for today, but coming up next is my deep dive, looking into the old diseases that are making a return and why we shouldn't be complacent. Have a listen to that one up next. Mumps, rubella, meningitis and diphtheria. These are just some of the long list of old diseases we're at risk of seeing return. With scepticism and misinformation about vaccines spreading like wildfire, experts have been left baffled as they watch childhood vax rates drop and even a once eliminated illness that killed hundreds of children a year pre-vaccines, measles, now spreading at concerning rates. So what's ahead of us if we continue on this path, and what are the old diseases that you can still catch today? Here to help us unpack this topic is Associate Professor in Infectious Disease Epidemiology, Dr. David Muscatello. Doctor, what's your take on these illnesses making a return?
Well, Tara, they've actually always been out there in parts of the world. We may not see them very often in Australia because we live in a very wealthy, developed country with a very strong health system, but many countries around the world still experience a lot of the diseases you're hearing about today. And it's possibly partly that I guess we've got better news, we've got better ways of detecting disease. One concern is particularly measles, which is a very infectious disease, and it can take hold very quickly if we let our guard down and we let vaccination levels drop. And you need to have very high vaccination levels to keep measles under control. And in fact, there's a whole ecology of diseases out there. There's in the natural world, diseases are still out there and they're ready to come back if we let our guard down.
And specifically when it comes to vaccine preventable illnesses, we're talking things like you mentioned measles, yellow fever, meningitis, monkeypox and polio. We are seeing more cases as far as I'd read globally. Which of those are the most concerning to you and why might that be?
We're seeing more measles. I think measles is really the main thing. Monkeypox, which is now called Mpox, is a new disease. It's been around for decades, in fact, but it's changing. And so one of the things about particularly viruses is that they evolve very quickly. So they mutate and they're constantly changing their character. And so Mpox is a disease that's related to smallpox, which, by the way, is the only infectious disease in humans that we have been able to eradicate is smallpox around 1980. But smallpox was part of a family of viruses that exist in the animal world and that can infect animals or humans, and those viruses can change and then they can spread into human populations, and if they change in a way that spreads from humans to humans more easily, then they can emerge as what appears to be a new disease, but in fact they have been around for a long time. Because of that, they become bigger problems in human populations.
And in the States, people like RF Kennedy Jr., who is now in the top health position and has actually been fueling a lot of anti-vaccine sentiment, if you have someone in such a high-up role kind of perpetuating those attitudes, could that have an impact here in Australia?
I think the important thing is here that from health authorities, we really need clear messaging about the safety of vaccines and the importance of being vaccinated. And as I said, if disease increases in other parts of the world, it can easily arrive again in Australia and increase the threat for us through travellers.
And now there are other ancient diseases like leprosy and scurvy. Now, I understand we are not having these in any kind of big rates at all, but we have had cases of it in Australia. And interestingly, in the States, someone recently just died of the Black Plague. Is this all unusual, and why are we seeing any of these cases of these illnesses?
Well, Tara, it's not actually that unusual. Plague has been around, as you know, for centuries and thousands of years, but there are ongoing cases of plague. There are several cases of plague every year in the United States. We pay attention because someone died from it, but it is occurring. It still exists in rodent populations like rats and prairie dogs in the western part of the United States. They still have plague, and if humans handle those animals, then, they can catch the plague. And there are, I think, around 13 cases a year in the western part of the United States. And leprosy, again, it's a disease that's still out there. It still happens in Australia, in some of our First Nations communities, unfortunately. We're much better at treating it now, and so it doesn't have the stigma that it used to, which is another reason we don't hear about it. There's only one country globally that's eliminated leprosy, and that's Jordan in the Middle East. So, which is surprising, isn't it?
When we were talking about the Black Plague before, is that an illness that you actually get via a bacteria? Like, how do you get the Black Plague?
Yeah, it is a bacteria, and it's transmitted either by handling infected animals. So if you're hunting animals, for example, and you're skinning them or whatever, you might come into contact with the bacteria, Yersinia pestis. And also it can, if animal populations are dying from plague, then the fleas that live in those animals can enter human habitats like, houses, and they can bite people and transmit the infection that way.
And we were talking just a bit before about measles and kind of other vaccine-preventable illnesses. What other kinds of diseases could hypothetically we could see a rise in if we were to continue seeing, say, lapsing vaccination rates going lower than we need for, say, herd immunity?
Well, there's many. There's, mumps, rubella, diphtheria. Diphtheria is a very nasty disease that still exists around the world. And as I said earlier, one of the main concerns is measles. Whooping cough or pertussis is also a concern. Tetanus could come back as well. So the reason we don't see many diseases is because we have done a great job of vaccinating people for a long time, and now people don't see the devastation that has been caused to people by these infectious diseases, and so it is easier to let your guard down because you think these diseases aren't a threat. But the only reason they're not a threat is because we've had a strong health system that's been holding them back. They haven't gone away. We've just got to keep holding them back by keeping strong vaccination levels. And we've done really well around the world, but vaccination rates, say, for measles around the world are around 85% at the moment, but you need around 95% coverage in children to stop the disease continuing to spread. We've just got to keep those vaccination levels up to keep our people safe.
And do you know where Australia sits in terms of percentage for measles?
It varies by state and territory, but we're around 90% for measles, 90 to 95%, but we've got to get it over that 95% level. So Australia is actually, we've eliminated measles. So there's two terms that we use. Elimination is when a country doesn't have local spread of the infection, and eradication is when the disease is completely gone. And so, as I said earlier, smallpox is the only disease we've actually been able to eradicate, infectious disease in humans. There's a global effort to try and eradicate other infections like measles, but we just need to be able to get those vaccination levels over that 95%, stop it spreading in every population. And what happens is, if it's been eliminated, it can still come into the country in travellers. And so what happens then is that you get small communities who might not have the same level of vaccination for whatever reason as the community on average as a whole, but there are pockets of communities that have lower vaccination levels, and then it can start to spread in those communities. And even though, we can generally control it, it will eventually die out, but it still can cause a lot of damage to people. Measles in most cases is a mild disease, but the small proportion who have complications like pneumonia or swelling of the brain, they can still occur in large enough numbers to cause people a lot of concern.
And working in the space that you do, is it concerning to see illnesses that we have managed to eliminate in Australia seeing more cases of them and seeing that kind of lax attitude toward getting vaccinated?
It is concerning. I think part of the difficulty was with COVID, and there was a huge vaccination campaign for COVID, which took people's and COVID itself took people's attention away from the focus on all the other diseases that we have to deal with, and that's understandable. It was a big threat. Now, maybe with being vaccinated against COVID, people aren't as keen to get more vaccine injections. But really, we really need to be careful to not let that happen. And the other thing about it is that it's a global effort. We might be doing very well in Australia, but if other countries let their guard down, then it threatens everyone else, because a virus or a bacteria doesn't need a passport to get into another country. They don't respect borders, and diseases just spread across borders, and that's why we just need to maintain our attention all the time to keep on top of these diseases.
Thank you for joining me on The Briefing today.
Okay, thanks.
That was Associate Professor in Infectious Disease Epidemiology, Dr. David Muscatello, speaking with me there. And that's it for this episode of The Briefing. If you found it interesting, don't forget to leave us a comment or a review, or you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.